Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar this evening, all about financial aid. We've got a number of attendees that will be coming in, so we're going to give everybody a moment to get settled into the Zoom here. So give us just a minute while everybody gets into the link, get settled in. Wow, we've got a number of attendees. This is fantastic. And we've got a great program for you all. So thank you for dedicating your evening with us on this Wednesday evening. I know there's a lot that you guys have coming up this December, and so we appreciate you taking the hour to listen in. But what we're going to do is get going in 1 minute here. It looks like everybody's kind of settling in. But my name is Kate, and I am the Director of Admissions here. And so you may have worked with me throughout part of the process, or potentially even received some good news already. We are trying to deliver that good news as we are moving through these applications. So it's really exciting to read and get to know every one of you throughout this process. But I'm actually going to turn it over this evening to another member of our admissions team and our financial aid team, who will be really doing the bulk of this evening. But again, my name is Kate, and I'm the Director of Admissions. One thing I did want to mention about this setup is that we are in the webinar format. So as those of you that are watching, you can see that we can't actually see you. And you can't see each other, but you can see us. And so we would really like you to interact and engage with us throughout this entire evening. And so please pop open at the bottom the Q&A function or the chat function. We're going to be looking at both and trying to get to as many questions. A lot of you had submitted questions throughout that registration process, so we will try to cover as many of those as possible. And of course, be available after the webinar if you had additional questions, because I know this is a very comprehensive process, and we're going to give you some more information on some future webinars as well. So don't feel like if you've missed something that you can't go back. We are recording this, so you will have that opportunity to continue to get the information that you need. But it looks like almost everybody is in. So welcome again to this webinar called Financial Aid Demystified. And this topic is how to read your financial aid offer, which some of you may have received already, and some of you may be in the process of getting your FAFSA in, and some of you may be receiving that shortly, depending on where you are in that process. So thank you again for tuning in. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Zach Sawyer, who's going to take it from here for a few minutes.
Thanks, Kate. And again, welcome to everybody to our next, this is actually our second webinar in the Financial Aid Demystified kind of series that we've put together. I'm working with Ryan to kind of get these together to be pretty comprehensive. We get a lot of questions in the realm of financial aid. Through the admissions office, through the financial aid office. It's a really big topic. Even with Ryan and I's background coming from banking, it was a whole learning process getting into the financial aid process. I started there before I came onto the admissions side, so I try to be helpful and knowledgeable to the students that we work with. I primarily work with a lot of our engineering students through my role here. So you may have received communication from me. I'm happy to be your point of contact going forward. If you have any questions about this process, and if I can't get you the answer, I'm happy to kind of shovel pass you back over to Ryan and his department. Ryan, if you want to go ahead and throw up the opening screen there on our presentation, we'll try to introduce what we got going on tonight. So this, like Kate said, is going to be all about how to read and maximize your financial aid offer letter. The initial offer letter right now is going out only to students who have been accepted and who have filed their FAFSA, their free application for federal student aid for this next year, the 23-24 year. So Ryan and I have worked really diligently to put together a totally comprehensive look at all the different ways that your offer might appear. And we're trying to address as many questions as we possibly can through the presentation. Please go ahead and use that chat function, that Q&A section throughout the presentation if anything sparks a question in you, and we'll be sure to spend some time at the end of this kind of jumping through all your different questions along the way. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan, who's going to jump right into the course.
All All right, thank you, Zach. Thank you, Kate, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. My name is Ryan French. I'm the Director of Financial Aid. And we, like Kate and Zach have said, we've done a webinar before. This will be our second one. And that prior webinar was on the FAFSA. So that's a big subject on its own. That's the free application for federal student aid. If that's something that you're interested in finding more information about, feel free to check that webinar out. I'm going to go over some of that information here on this presentation as well. So some of this might be review. If you tuned in last time, there will be a little bit of a review here. But there's a couple concepts that I just want to make sure I hammer home for those who have already got it, and provide the information to the people who haven't gotten it yet, as we dive deeper into the financial aid offer. Oh boy. There we go. Okay. So our first big question: what is financial aid? I did answer this question in the last webinar. This is a pretty basic question. The basic answer is financial aid are the funds provided to students and their families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses, often dependent on financial need. So financial aid comes in a lot of types and sources. We've got grants that you may be eligible for through the federal government, through state governments. There are loans. There are federal loans from doing the FAFSA. There are private loans out there. There are even some institutional loans you may be eligible for. There are plenty of scholarships out there, lots of private scholarships you can go and seek out. There are some institutional scholarships as well. We're going to go into information, go into a little bit of detail on some of that stuff. There's tons of resources on the website, and I'm going to sort of direct you to some of that stuff. And the final type and source is work study, which again, we briefly went into on that FAFSA webinar, and I will go into a little bit more detail this evening as well. So the first big concept that we have to go over for you to really start getting a big idea on your financial aid offer letter, as you look at them, as you receive them, as you look at them, as you try and decipher them. The first big concept is cost of attendance. This is a really good visualization here as we try and break it down for you so you can understand what that number is. Right off the bat, if you look in that bottom right-hand corner there, it says all assumptions are rough estimates. I'm going to say this many times this evening, but cost of attendance, it's a budgeting tool. It is an estimate, it is a budget, and we use it so that you can be better prepared for school as you come in. And it's also really good for planning ahead for the academic year as we get closer to those bills coming out, typically in July for the fall semester. When those bills come in, you're going to see in the blue there, you see those direct costs. Those are direct costs of attendance. Those are billable costs. So depending on maybe the degree program that you're in, your state of residency, that direct cost, that billable cost might be a little different. But when we talk cost of attendance, it's going to be a pretty accurate representation of what you will likely see on your bill. Those direct costs are made up of tuition and fees. Tuition, is again related to in-state, out-of-state, regional. There are also some undergraduate fees that are associated with, getting education here at Maine Maritime Academy. That undergraduate fee category is the same for all students, regardless of residency. That next category there on the bottom is room and board. When we create our cost of attendance budget, we are considering room and board for a typical two-person room with a traditional 21 meal plan. Something that I'll go into a little bit more detail later as we talk about some of the cost of attendance figures, is that as you make changes to your actual billable costs. So as you maybe make changes to your meal plan, or potentially move into a single room or a triple room, or That's a lot of information, but as you make changes, your cost of attendance will likely not change because again, it's a budgeting tool. It's sort of based on a rough estimate, and those values don't necessarily change as you make actual changes to your student profile. Over on the left there's also a small category there of direct costs for license fees and uniforms. That's going to be for our unlimited license majors. So not everybody is going to see that category on their direct cost of attendance, but some of you will. And that's going to be the charges for that unlimited license program along with uniforms for the regiment. So then we look at that green category. Those are indirect costs. These are things that we include in the cost of attendance so that you can budget for school, but they are things that are not going to be directly billed by the school. That includes personal, miscellaneous, travel expenses, books and laptop expenses. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on all those categories, but suffice it to say, it is included in your cost of attendance so that you can budget for those items, but our billing office does not directly bill students and families for those items. So the other thing that I've included from the last webinar is a little bit of financial aid arithmetic, which is just important information to know as we start looking at these offer letters and as you start trying to figure out how to bridge the gap, basically how to read the letter, how to plan ahead. The first big one is the need calculation. So financial need is something that is determined by taking that cost of attendance that we just talked about, that total cost of attendance, and subtracting out what's called your expected family contribution. So if you've already done the FAFSA, you may know what this is. You may not know what this is, even if you have done the FAFSA. But this is a figure that's determined by the federal government from student and parent financial information and personal information that's submitted on that FAFSA. And at the end of it, they come up with a number, and that number is what they say, the federal government says, a family could reasonably be expected to contribute to a student's education. We take that number, we subtract it out of your cost of attendance, and that is, as the federal government defines it, your financial need. That's how much money you need to cover in order to go to school. The next category, or the next equation, I guess, that we include on there is the gap calculation. So the gap calculation takes those same two values, the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, and we subtract one more thing out of there, which is the estimated financial aid, or EFA, as I may call it, as we move forward. The EFA is an anticipated total of all federal, institutional, and private financial aid. So this is the number that's going to be on your offer letter, and is a number that, unlike cost of attendance, is not as static. As you maybe apply for, outside aid, you get a private loan, you get an endowed scholarship, all things I'll go into more detail on later. But as you get those things, your estimated financial aid is going to fluctuate. And often it's going to increase as we get closer and closer to the fall admission, or the fall, sorry, as we get closer to the fall semester. Anyway, when we take that estimated financial aid, we remove it from the cost of attendance, just like we did with that expected family contribution. We come up with what's called the financial gap. And that gap is the remaining budget after a student's financial aid offer and EFC has been subtracted from their cost of attendance. Again, I know I said it once, I'm going to say it again, and I'll probably say it another couple times after this. That number is a budget. It's not a balance. So as we start talking about gap, and gap planning and budgeting and budget planning and all of that stuff, we are talking about trying to make a budgeted and planned out financial plan for school, basically. But as you look at those financial aid offers and you make those calculations, we're not talking about an actual billable balance at this point. Bills, like I said, for the fall, they don't come out until July. So that's when we start looking at the real numbers. So between now and then, we're talking all about these budgeted numbers. So this, some of you may have seen one of these or something that looks a little similar to this. Some of you may have not received one of these yet. This is a sample of what our offer letter looks like. This isn't the whole letter. This is the section that is really the most important, breaks down your cost of attendance and your estimated financial aid. The first thing I want to address on here, I know I just hammered into it again, but right down there at the bottom, this letter is not your billing statement. I think we do a pretty good job, making it clear through the aid letter. If you look up there under those direct charges, it does say it's an annual estimate. Your final bill may differ from this estimate. Also under those other expenses, again, it's an annual estimate. But just again, to clarify, not a billing statement, definitely a budgeting tool. So, like I said, up top here, we've got the estimated cost of attendance. On the left, we've got those direct charges that we talked about earlier, your tuition, your room, your board, that general fee category. There's also medical insurance, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. And that gives you your total direct costs for the entire year. It's an annual amount for the fall and spring combined. Over on the right here, we've got those indirect costs that we talked about, also referred to as non-billable expenses. So those are the ones that we include really for budgeting purposes only. They're never going to show up on a student's bill, but we like to include them so that you can plan ahead for them. If the student needs to get a new laptop, if they're going to need to go home for Christmas break, we need to include that transportation budget so that you can plan ahead for those sorts of things. I said I wanted to talk about medical insurance. It is included on the direct charges. So this is something that would show up on your bill. If you have your own insurance, there will be a point where you can talk to our student life and our finance office, and you can actually waive the medical insurance. It is a requirement to come to school here that you have medical insurance. You can opt to use our insurance, which will charge you $1,887 in the fall. If you have your own private insurance, you can waive it. Regardless, it's going to show up on your cost of attendance. So when you pull this cost of attendance up, you get a letter sent to you in the mail or via email, or you pull it up on the internet. In any case, it's going to have that medical insurance on there, even if you've waived it, because again, it is a cost of going to school. So even if you've got it privately, you should still be allowed to budget for it. You should still be budgeting for it. And so we include it whether you've waived it or not. So down here on the bottom is the estimated financial aid. This is the various sources of aid that you've received, whether federal, private, institutional. This is the money that you are getting to help cover for school. I broke it down a little bit here. This one right here is the merit scholarship. So many of you who have seen one of these or have gotten your, your admission letter saying you've been accepted. There's been some information on the merit you may have received as an incoming freshman. Merit scholarships are going to be included on that financial aid offer. The amount that you receive may vary from this amount here. The name of the scholarship may vary depending on maybe GPA or degree path, but there will be a line item on your estimated financial aid as an incoming freshman for a merit scholarship. If you don't see one, please feel free to reach out, let me know. But all students that are being admitted right now, newly admitted students, should all have this item on their financial aid offer. Those other three under sources there are our federal aid in this case. So right now, the only students who are receiving financial aid offers are students who have completed the FAFSA. And the reason for that really is because all of the students who have been admitted so far have received merit. They already know what their merit is, or presumably have been sent communications from our admissions department about what their merit is. So it kind of doesn't make sense for us to send necessarily an offer letter out describing what your merit is when you already know what it is. But as we start adding more things in there, the federal loans, maybe other scholarships and things like that, we want to keep an accurate and up-to-date representation of what your estimated financial aid is. One thing to note is over here on the right, unlike the cost of attendance, which is shown as an annual estimate, a total year, fall, spring, all lumped in together. When we break out the financial aid, we break it out between the fall and the spring. You can see all the way to the right there, you've got your totals for all of those line items, but it is broken down in those first two columns between fall and spring. The reason we do that, in most cases, institutional aid, federal aid, even some private aid out there, it's going to be split evenly between the two semesters. In some cases, it won't. So there are some private scholarships. Potentially, you decide you need to get a loan to cover a little bit of gap in the spring. Maybe it's going to look a little different. It's not going to fully match up semester to semester. So we like to include the two semesters there, so you can see the difference between the two, and then you get your total at the end. All right. So this is our second offer letter. I include this offer letter just as an example. So a lot of the information up there under cost of attendance is pretty much the same. It's a very similar, I pulled these from actual students. So this is a very similar student profile. The reason I included it is because the bottom part, that estimated financial aid, is a little different. So the important thing to note here that I just want to go over in a little detail is the direct unsubsidized loan. So this student received, he did the FAFSA, and he got a direct unsubsidized loan in the amount of $5,500. All first year dependent undergraduate students are going to receive $5,500 in federal direct loans. If you want more really exhaustive detail on what first year dependent undergraduate means, you can go back and listen to our previous webinar. But very basically, I would say the majority of our incoming freshmen are going to be classified as first year dependent undergraduate students. It's a number, or it's a designation that's sort of defined by your answers that you've put in on the FAFSA. So it's a determination made by the federal government. And when that information comes in, we use that to determine what loans you're going to get. So in this case, as it says, $5,500 maximum for a first year dependent undergraduate student. I'm going to bring up the award letter that we were looking at on the previous slide here. So if you look at that offer from the previous slide, this student received work study, direct subsidized loan, and direct unsubsidized loan as his federal aid. So it looks a little different. And I just wanted to explain what the difference was. The first thing to note here is that both students did get $5,500 in federal loans. So it's broken up a little differently, but they both got the same amount. So it's that $5,500 that you're going to receive. The thing that makes the difference is need. So when we went back and if you think back to that slide where we were talking about those, relatively simple math problems that are somehow way more complicated than they look, you come up with that need calculation, and at the end of it, that determines how you receive your $5,500 in federal loans. So in this case, the student on the bottom has the entire amount in an unsubsidized loan. That unsubsidized portion, or having it all in an unsubsidized portion, indicates to me, and could indicate to you reviewing your financial aid offer, that the federal government determined that you did not have any financial need. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on what the difference between those two loans are in a second. But suffice it to say, this top student, the student from the previous example, has that $5,500 split out between subsidized and unsubsidized. They also have work study, and those indicate that the student had need as determined by the federal government. So the difference really between those two is that an unsubsidized loan is accruing interest while you're in school, and a subsidized loan is not accruing interest while you're in school. So typically, or the way that the programs are set up, a student who is determined to have need, like in our sample offer letter number 1, they'll have $3,500 that's accruing no interest the entire time they're in school until they graduate. And that unsubsidized portion of $2,000 will be accruing interest. I say that's typically how it works, because right now there's actually no interest accrual for any direct federal loans. That's a holdover still from COVID. They just extended it a little bit longer. I don't know how long that's going to last, but for now anyway, students who have taken out unsubsidized loans from the federal government are not having interest assessed on their loans. But typically they would. So that is an important thing to just think about as you're, planning ahead. Then the other thing I wanted to identify from that offer letter number 1 is the work study. So work study is something that we include on your estimated financial aid, but it's important to remember that it's earned throughout the year and is not directly applied towards a student's bill. So what that means is you do the FAFSA, you're determined to have some sort of financial need. The federal government says, hey, you're allowed to get work study. And that means that you can go and talk to an employer here on campus while you're here at school. You say, hey, I'm a work study student. And in all likelihood, you will have first pick at some of the jobs here on campus. And you start working and the federal government sends the school money to give you in the form of a paycheck. Not all students who qualify or are eligible for work study are going to work. A lot of our students, maybe they're in athletics, they're in the regiment, they've got a really heavy workload or a combination of all 3 of those things, and they just don't have time to work. And that's totally fine. But it's important to remember that work study, even if it's included on your estimated financial aid, you don't get it unless you earn it, meaning it may be there for you to tap into, but you're only going to get that money if you take a job on campus. So that's just, and if you want more information on that, please feel free to reach out. But that's very basically, what work study is. So moving on to a third example. This one is different for a number of reasons. The first big one is you can see there's a few more charges there under direct charges, but the total direct cost is a little bit lower. So this is a student who's actually from the state of Maine, which means that the tuition rate is a little bit less, but this is also a student who's in the regiment, is in that unlimited license program, so they're getting charged those additional fees. They're getting charged for the unlimited license. They're being charged for crews. They're being charged for uniforms and regimental items, and those are all included under that direct cost category. The other reason I wanted to bring this student up is to show a few quick examples of federal and state aid that you might see on your financial aid offer. So the first one listed there is the federal Pell Grant. So the Pell Grant is something that you get through doing the FAFSA. It is something that comes from the federal government, and it is dependent on that EFC, which is that expected family contribution that the FAFSA determines. So depending on your family's financial situation, eligibility for that Pell Grant begins at a maximum of $6,207, meaning if you have an EFC of 6207 or less, you will receive the Pell Grant, or you should receive the Pell Grant. It depends on full-time or part-time status. So if you drop down to part-time, you may be eligible for less money. It also is technically dependent on your cost of attendance. However, there aren't any students, any programs here at this school where the cost of attendance would be low enough to impact the Pell Grant. So that's just an important thing to remember as well. The maximum Pell Grant that you can receive for the current award year, that's 22-23, is $6,895. I include that because as far as we know right now, that's going to be the number for 23-24, but the amounts can change, and we haven't gotten any notification, and it could change really any time between now and the fall. So that's the number we're using right now as a budget, but it may change. Next category here is this federal grant listed as FSEOG. I broke that out. We usually call it SEOG here in the higher ed world, but the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, which is a mouthful, that is federal money that is sent directly to the school. So it's the federal government says, all right, here's a bunch of money, MMA. You can give this out to Pell eligible students. It is up to you how you give that out to Pell eligible students, or when you do. So Maine Maritime, we try and give it out as soon as we get it. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. And there's a little bit of a structure depending on, residency and major we will determine, the amount of SEOG you get, but, for the most part, it's a relatively fair distribution of those funds. Again, they only go to the Pell eligible students. So if you've got an EFC above $6,207 after doing the FAFSA, you unfortunately will not be eligible for Pell or SEOG. But it's important to remember that those, like I said, those are funds that go quick. So if you haven't completed your FAFSA yet, and you think there's a possibility that you could be eligible for Pell, do your FAFSA now. Because the sooner you do it, the more likely it is that you receive that SEOG, because once that money's gone, it's gone. So just keep that in mind. The next line item there is that state of Maine grant. So this is something that you're only going to see on your financial aid offer if you are from the state of Maine. I'm sure we've got plenty of people from out of state on the webinar right now, but we do have a lot of Maine students here too. So I just wanted to make sure I brought this one up. The Maine grant is managed by the Finance Authority of Maine for the state, and it is a $2,500 grant, which is automatically awarded to any Maine resident in an undergraduate program who's completed the FAFSA with an EFC less than $7,000. So it's a little different than Pell, but in general, if I would say if you qualify for Pell, you qualify for the Maine grant if you're from the state of Maine. I bring it up for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, if you are a Maine student and it's not on your financial aid offer and you've got Pell on there, reach out, let me know, because clearly we've missed you and we apologize. But also because if you are an out-of-state student, your state may have grant programs as well to look out for. So definitely, look at your state website, see if, you can type in the name of your state and the word, educational grant, and see what programs they may have available. I know Vermont is one where if you're from Vermont and you come to MMA, you can get a grant from the state to come here. Not all states will give students grants if they go to school out of state. So that's just an important thing to remember. However, definitely just take a look and see, because there's definitely grant programs out there that you can tap into. So, all right, moving on. This is that same student. So it's the same offer letter, but we've made a couple adjustments, and I include it because I wanted to show a couple other quick examples, adding in some scholarships and private loans. So these are things that are going to show up. You may be adding them in as you start going out for private scholarships, as you look into other programs, as you start planning to fill in that gap. Your financial aid offer is going to change as we start adding those things in. Now, you may not get an offer letter by default every time we make an addition to your aid package. However, anytime you want one, you can just ask and we can send you one. And on the next slide, I'm going to go over in a little bit of detail how to view this stuff online as well. So the first one on there you can see is that Vice Admiral C.F. Bryant Scholarship. So that's an endowed scholarship. That's an endowment from Vice Admiral C.F. Bryant, who sent money to the school and said, I would like this money to sit in an endowment, and any of the interest that it accrues, I would like you to give it to a student at Maine Maritime Academy. So to be considered for scholarships like that, you must complete the endowed scholarship application. Some of you may have received one of those in the mail with your admissions packet. We kind of stopped sending them out with the admit packet because it wound up being just a lot of information, but it is available on the website. And you go to the financial aid website through mma.edu and direct yourself to forms, and it's listed right there. Once you complete the endowed scholarship application, send it back to us. We will put it on file. We will indicate that you are interested in endowed scholarships, and those our hope is to be awarded in late winter, early spring. We haven't actually gotten the official budgets for a lot of those endowments yet from our finance office. So we're kind of waiting on that at the moment. But we have a kind of rough estimate, and we're working with them to get that information as quickly as possible so that we can start getting those endowed scholarships awarded. But I would say a good estimate for a lot of those endowed scholarships is probably going to be in February. That next category there are private scholarships. I include that item just so you can see kind of how it looks on the financial aid offer. These are scholarships that you maybe have gotten on your own. Perhaps you've gotten them through online resources, or you went to your local civic organization and they had a scholarship available for you. Many of those scholarships tend to be awarded per semester. So in this case, if you look at the breakdown, that private scholarship is $5,000 split between the 2 semesters, $2,500 and $2,500. That's not often how it looks, actually. So, you may get $2,000 here, $500 there from private scholarship organizations. They may be all in the fall. They may be split between the 2 semesters. You may not get any of the money until the spring. Those organizations make those determinations, and when you receive your award letter that says, hey, look, you got this scholarship, it's going to tell you how that money gets split up. Some of those organizations, so it's really important to read those letters. Some of those organizations require that you prove that you're actually going to school here. Some of them require that you prove that you actually did well in school before they will send the money to the school or send the money to you. So definitely keep an eye on those and make sure that you're reading those really carefully. And then if you have any questions about them, you can reach out to those organizations, because they've usually got people who deal specifically with those scholarships, but also feel free to reach out to us. Send it to me in an email. I can review it for you, and we can go over some information on that. That last one that I indicated down there is a private loan. So this, if we're imagining this student they've got their federal grant, they've got their main grant, they got their merit scholarship, they got their federal loans, they got a little private scholarship and an endowed, and then they decide, actually I need to bridge the gap a little bit more. So I need to go out and get a private loan. There are lots of resources out there for private loans. There are resources straight through the state of Maine, actually, through the same organization that does the state of Maine grant, FAME, the Finance Authority of Maine, does a really great loan program. There's a couple that you may be way more familiar with, in name at least. Those might be Sallie Mae, College Ave, Discover, the credit card company. They also do student loans. So those are all some great resources out there. But we also have a resource available through our website called Elm Select, which is a great website to go to and check out private lenders. You can compare and contrast interest rates and their various programs that they have available. And as you are doing that gap planning, and you're maybe you've considered private loans, something to remember is that those private lenders will fund for the entire year. So as you are looking at those and you are filling out those applications, we definitely want to be looking at our cost of attendance, looking at our budget, looking at our financial plan, and planning ahead for the whole year. There are some students out there who, they go semester by semester. More power to them if they choose to do it that way. But I would say the best way to really get the most out of some of those private loans is to get them for the entire year. We're going to do an entire webinar just on loans. So, keep an eye out for that. There's a ton of information to go over in there. But if you have questions about private loans, you can also feel free to reach out and we can answer any questions that you may have. Once you've applied for a loan, the lender actually reaches out to the school and asks us to certify it, meaning they're asking us, hey, does this person actually go to school there? And we say, yes. We tell them what your cost of attendance is. They say, okay, here's the money. We tell them where to send it, when to send it, and then we go on from there. So I did mention that there is a website that you can go to. We do have a financial aid portal. It's right at myfinaid.mma.edu, and through that website, or you can navigate there directly, or you can go through the student portal using your MMA login at mymma.mma.edu and navigate over to the financial aid portal that way. But regardless, once you get there, you'll get to a welcome screen. There'll be a menu button in the top left-hand corner. You can click on awards and it will bring you to this page here, which is basically your financial aid offer letter. It looks a little different. I'm going to go over some of those differences, but it is available online. It is real time, which is helpful. So as we make changes, this changes immediately. But it is a little different. So let's go over that real quick. So this first category is the cost of attendance, direct and indirect. It looks basically the same as it appears on the financial aid offer. It's split out the same way. It's got all of the same categories and information. There's very little difference between the two of them. This next one is the financial aid offer. So this is your EFA. This is your estimated financial aid. This is the total number that you would be receiving between grants, scholarships, work study, loans, any of that stuff is all going to be bulked together, split between the 2 semesters and totaled on the end there. The next category starts breaking out some of that total financial aid offer. So in this student's case, we've got the grants and scholarships category, and we've got their merit scholarship listed there. It's going to list out any of the free money you've received, whether it's from the school, private organizations, federal grants, state grants, etc. The next line item is one that we haven't gone over yet. So this is net cost. This is something that we didn't really include in our financial aid arithmetic, and is something that is, it's a harder concept, I guess, to grasp. So it's kind of hard to go over in extreme detail on a webinar, but it is a good budgetary tool as you start gap planning. Net cost is your cost of attendance minus the free money. So this is grants, scholarships, any that you've received from any organization, private, federal, or school. We calculate your net cost because this is it, and again, it's your total cost of attendance. So it's your direct costs and your indirect costs. So things that we bill for and things that we don't, all combined together, and then we subtract out those grants and scholarships. It's it's not a great budgetary tool, honestly. It winds up confusing some people, but as you start gap planning, this website, the website that we use, breaks out that net cost so that you are getting a picture before you take into account any of the federal or private loans that you've been offered. So that's why it's broken out that way. So that next category there are loans. It's going to list out those federal, private, or institutional loans. Another thing to note here is that those other categories up there, your financial aid offer and your grants and scholarships, those are broken out between the 2 semesters and then totaled. The loans is the same thing, but it's slightly different. The reason for that is because the federal government charges you an origination fee. So when you get your $5,500, they say, yeah, you're going to get $5,500. And then when they send it to the school, it's actually only $5,444 because they charge an origination fee on those loans. So it sort of breaks that out so you can see it. It's not that far off, but just so you can see that if you get an unsubsidized loan for $2,000, it's split $1,000 for the fall, $1,000 for the spring. You're actually only going to get $990 for the fall and spring sent to the school. It doesn't, again, like I said, it doesn't make a huge difference, but as you are planning for your budget, it may be helpful just to know that information. Those private lenders are not going to be charged, they're not charging an origination fee as it comes to the school. So also important to remember, if you take out a $10,000 loan, they're going to send $10,000 to the school. So that was a ton of information. We've gotten sort of to the question and answer period here. I've put together some frequently asked questions that I just wanted to go over in a little detail. And then I hope if you've asked questions, you put them in the chat. Zach is going to read some of those questions off for me. Some of your questions may have been answered already, but we'll go over some of this and hopefully I address some of your questions right now. If not, we'll have a little time to go over some of that stuff. So the first big one that we've gotten from a lot of students and families is, when will I receive my offer letter? So hopefully you've already gotten it. If you haven't, currently only newly admitted students who have completed their FAFSA are being sent financial aid offer letters. I sort of explained why earlier. I say only newly admitted students because we haven't started the process of transferring in all of the current students into the next academic year yet, because we wanted to focus on the newly admitted students first. But I would say most current and new students will have received their initial letter by February. So if you haven't gotten a letter, by mid-January, definitely reach out. But I would say my hope is that in the next few weeks, we'll have letters out to everybody. But what's important to remember is that regardless of whether you've gotten your letter sent to you in the mail, any student who is a pending fall student coming in fall of 2023 will be able to view their offer in real time on myfinaid.mma.edu on the financial aid portal later this month. So some of you can already go on there and see it as it stands right now, even if you haven't done the FAFSA. But those like I said, those continuing students, potentially students who were just recently admitted in the last few days, they'll have to get their profiles set up. And once those profiles are set up, you'll have access to that financial aid portal on the website. That second question, I got a private scholarship. Now what do I do? I bring this one up because it does wind up being a question we get often. So, I highly encourage that you go out and you apply for private scholarships. When you get them, they're going to come in one of two basic forms. Either it's going to say this money is coming directly to the student, or the money's coming directly to the school. Most cases, it's coming to the school. If it's coming to you, technically, I don't need to know about it. I don't need to include it in your financial aid offer on my end. It does not need to, quote unquote, count against you as you start looking for other scholarships and other financial aid out there. But if you would like it included in your budget, feel free to send it to me. If you've got one that says it's going to, you got your offer or your award letter from the scholarship organization, and it says that they'll be sending money directly to the school, please send that along to me, because I do need to include it in your estimated financial aid on your aid package. As we start putting together some of that information, I do need to have those on file, and it will help you, as far as budgeting goes, to plan ahead. You can send those to me directly. My email will be, actually my email I think is viewable now, maybe not. Yeah, viewable now, but it will also be on the last slide here. I'll have some more of my contact information, but you can also send it to the financial aid inbox at financial.aid@mma.edu. We upload it and we include it on the student's aid profile so that you can plan ahead for that. Question 3, this is a big one that we get. How do I get more money from the school? We talked about that a little bit. Like I said, go online. If you don't have one, go online, find the endowed scholarship application, fill that out and send that in to be considered for additional endowed scholarship aid through the school. Question 4 there, how do I fill the gap? I would say first and foremost, start applying for outside scholarships as soon as you can. Some organizations, they are already taking applications for the 23-24 academic year. Some applications won't open up until we get closer to the fall. But if you go on our website, we list out some of the private scholarship organizations that we've identified as really good programs. There's also a couple links there to scholarship search engines. You can go to Google and look up scholarship search engines if you like. We're going to have a whole webinar series next month that's going to go over a little bit of those outside sources of aid and how to really seek out some of those other options. But if you need more information, you want to get a jump start on it, feel free to reach out, check out the website for resources there. And like I say, apply early and often. So you can go on Maybe set yourself a monthly reminder to go on and look for some scholarships and apply through some of those search engines or some of those organizations. The more free money that you get, the easier this process is as we get closer to the fall. There's also other options for filling gap. Most of the rest of our webinar series is going to be about some of those options. So like I said, we've got the scholarships. There's the endowed scholarships. There's the private scholarships. There's also loans. We're going to do a whole series on that as well. So question 5. This one's a very specific question, but I wanted to include it. Why don't I see my VA or GI benefits on my financial aid offer? So this is for veterans and veteran dependents. So again, like I said, some of you, this may not apply, but I wanted to just point out that many of those veteran benefits bypass my office by design. The VA determines what those benefits will be. So if you have questions about, what kind of benefits you may be eligible for, reach out, work directly with the VA. They're the ones that put together a description of what your benefits are. They work with Laura Nason-Moulton in our registrar's office to certify some of that information. So she may be able to answer some questions, but really, I would say that the first person to go to is the VA to talk about some of that stuff. And the VA's expectation is that when they send us that information, they send us that benefit letter, we cannot use that information as justification to reduce any of your other aid. So we can't say, oh, well, look, John got all this money from the VA, so he doesn't necessarily need this other, private scholar, this, endowed scholarship as much as somebody else does. Those are, highly regulated pieces of data. And so, your VA benefits are never going to count against you as you start looking for, institutional, private, federal aid. So like I said, it bypasses our office. It kind of goes straight to the finance office. So you come here, you say, hey, I got this private scholarship, or we've got an endowed scholarship. I put your whole package together. I send that to the finance office. They take it off your bill, and then they apply your VA benefits. So that's why it doesn't show up on your offer letter. If you want to have a budgeting conversation about how your offer may look, well, including some of those VA benefits, that's something that I may be able to talk to you about privately, or honestly, the finance office, our billing office, is probably going to have the best information and the best estimate and budget on some of that, including those VA benefits. So number 6, I declined insurance. Why is it still on my financial aid offer? I include this one because we get this question a lot. I know I've gone over it a number of times. I'm going to hammer it home one more time, everybody. The financial aid offer is not a bill. So oftentimes when I get this question, it is coming from a family member or a student who has looked on myfinaid.mma.edu, and they see that they've got medical insurance listed under their direct cost of attendance, and they say, I waived that. Why is it still listed on my bill? So it's not, first off, it's not your bill. And second off, that cost of attendance, like I said earlier, it's relatively static. So even a student who's going to decline their insurance, maybe even a student who's living off campus, is still going to have those charges. They're still going to have medical insurance, and they're still going to have room and board listed under their direct cost of attendance. And the reason for that is because it is a budgeting tool. And so we keep those items so that a student can plan for, bridging that gap and potentially borrowing for those expenses. So even though you've declined insurance through the school, even though you're living off campus, you still presumably have insurance, and maybe through your parents, and maybe through a business, but you still, someone's paying for it, realistically. So you should still be allowed to, budget for it. Same thing with some of those other direct costs as you move off campus, maybe, or you change your meal plan, or you change your room plan. We still want you to be able to budget for those items. So we keep them on the cost of attendance. If you really, desperately want to have adjustments made to your cost of attendance, we can do that. That's a case-by-case basis. So that's something you could come and talk directly to my office about, and we can go over that. So Zach, did we have any questions from the internet world out there?
Yes, the field has been quite active, and I want to say thank you to Kate for jumping in and helping me answer some of these questions. I believe we got to most of them. However, there was one that I think you and I had talked about we would have wanted to address at some point here that actually got posed during the chat. So let's take the first opportunity to put that one out to you. Where was it here? Just gonna pull it up. Mass Maritime helps out with out-of-state tuition students. Does MMA have anything similar?
Oh, that's a really great question. So yes, short answer, yes. Actually, our merit structure, so the merit awards that you have received, they are determined based on residency and degree program and GPA. So out-of-state students, or I would say 2 students who have the same GPA and are in the same major program, the student who is going to school from out of state will receive more money in merit. All things considered, if they're from out of state, they'll receive more. And the reason for that is because our out of state students are charged more money. And so we sort of weight the merit scholarships in the same way. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Will I receive any type of financial aid for attending this meeting this evening?
That's a great question. And I really, really wish that we were doing that. I mean, honestly, I can say not directly, but hopefully you've got some information here today on looking for some of those private scholarships, looking for, some of those endowed scholarships. So like I said, if you haven't done the FAFSA, if you haven't done the endowed scholarship application, definitely fill those out because there may be some opportunities there.
Yeah, perfect. And more on that too, right? We're going to have more sessions later on. They're talking about more outside sources of aid and loan programs.
Absolutely, yeah. So
we'll cover
right
that
here,
in full. But I think that's a great question and good on you for trying.
Yeah, that's great. So next month, actually in January, we've got that outside sources of aid webinar. In February, we're going to talk about those loans. In March, we're going to talk about the total package. So we're going to kind of do a whole review. There'll be a couple other pieces of information in there. And then after that, in April, we are going to talk about the gap. So completing that financial aid process and sort of as we transition over towards real bills coming out in July.
Let's see here. What scholarships are actually offered at Maine Maritime Academy?
That's a great question. There's a ton of them. So we've got a ton of endowments available. Only maybe, some of them have $100 here available every year, but we do have a bunch of endowed scholarships available. If you want information on those endowments, or you want information on some of those institutional scholarships, you can check out the website. If you go to mma.edu, navigate to admissions and financial aid, there'll be a whole list of some of the private scholarships that we have, the endowed scholarships that we have available. If you want any more information on any of those, you can feel free to reach out to my office and we can answer any questions you might have.
I actually dropped the link to that website page that you were just talking about right in the chat function. So anybody who's interested, go ahead and take a look through some of that there.
Thanks, Zach.
You're welcome. Let's see. Does MMA participate in CSS?
That's a really good question. CSS is the College Scholarship Service, which is run through College Board, which you may be familiar with. We are not a CSS school. So some schools require that students complete the FAFSA and a CSS profile in order to be considered for institutional scholarships and in order to sort of budget and plan for financial aid in general. We are not one of those schools. So you are not required to complete a CSS profile in order to be considered for aid here at Maine Maritime.
Zach, I'm not sure if you've seen, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A that are popping through.
Yeah, I see those ones coming in. So Ryan, this one's here in the chat currently. I've done my FAFSA, but my MMA portal message says that you haven't received it yet. I have an email confirmation from FAFSA. Has this ever happened before?
Oh, it happens all the time. So that may, I apologize. That may depend on when you completed the FAFSA and when we actually receive the information. There are certain cases where the information doesn't immediately get sent to the school. There are some cases where a student might be selected for verification, which is a process where there might be some information, some discrepancies that came through on the FAFSA, and it comes through to us, and there's an extra process that has to occur before we can go ahead and package some of the financial aid you might be eligible for. So there are a couple of situations where that might be the case. I would say if you've completed your FAFSA and you go to MyFinaid and you see that it says we're still looking for it, feel free to send me an email. Send me an email, let me know, and I can keep an eye out for it. It could be something as simple as someone miskeyed your social security number when we created your financial aid profile, and it's just not linking up from the data that's coming in from the federal government. So it could be something as simple as that. Feel free to send me an email individually, and I'll take a look at that for you.
Perfect.
Great question. Thank you.
We do get that one all the time. We have a really great IT team here on campus that helps us kind of work through some of those issues as well. So it could be something as simple as you need a reset on your password to be able to access everything, or there's plenty of different opportunities to fix problems with that. And Ryan's team is really good about jumping in there and helping families on an individual basis when they need help accessing that information or if something isn't communicating properly. So yeah, definitely go ahead and reach out to Ryan. We have one more here. Can you just review one more time how to find the award in budget info after logging in using the ID for accepted students?
Yes. So when you log in, you're going to come to a welcome page. You're going to look, you're going to make sure that in the top right-hand corner, it's going to say your name there. It's going to say welcome, whatever your name is. Directly underneath that, it's going to ask you what award year you're in. For all of our newly admitted students, there should only be one option. It should be 23-24. It should default to that, but if for whatever reason it's not, make sure you select 23-24. Then on the top, all the way to the left on the other side of the screen, there is a menu button. On that menu button, you're going to click awards. It should be the very first thing on the list. And that's going to show your cost of attendance information and any of the awards that are currently showing up on your financial aid offer, as I went over in the previous slide. This is also where, if you've received federal loans, I know we didn't really go over this in any detail at all, but when you receive those federal loans, this is also going to be where you go in to accept or decline those loans if you choose to take them out or you decide you don't want them. Underneath the word award on the menu is accept awards. That's where you're going to go in. It's going to show you everything that you've received. It's going to break out those federal loans and ask you, hey, do you want these or do you not want these? And that'll be your opportunity to say accept or decline. But yeah, so menu and awards, that's what you're looking for on that one. And if you don't see anything there, again, reach out, let me know. Everybody should, but should is not will. So.
Well, I wanted to jump in. It is 8 o'clock and I appreciate everybody sticking around for this entire hour. If anybody needs to go, please do so. We're going to keep recording for the next few minutes just to make sure we've got the last few questions answered, but we will be sending out the recording. I've also made sure that our names on the Zoom are our emails. So if you have any particular questions that you didn't get to tonight, or you just want to jot these down on a Post-it note on your kitchen counter so you can reach out to us later tonight when you're thinking all this stuff over, feel free to do so. We're here to help. All of us, our entire team is here. And so if you don't reach Ryan, myself, or Zach, we will make sure that you've got somebody available to help answer these questions, because we know it can be a very complicated process. So that's why we're doing this whole series, and hopefully it is helpful to you. But again, thank you for staying on for this hour, and any last questions, throw them in so that we can make sure to get them answered live.
Yeah, so I see Zach is actually responding to a question right now. I'm gonna jump in and answer it if you don't mind. Somebody
Yeah.
reached out and said, I'm going through those endowment scholarships as you're speaking, and there are so many, and I wasn't lying. There's a ton of them. This person is asking if I can steer them towards one that they should look at. So in this case, as we have newly admitted students, we're actually working on a new program right now where you do that endowed scholarship application, and that's sort of it. And we find the scholarships that are going to apply to you, and we are going to, knock on wood, hopefully award those without you having to do the legwork of finding specific ones to apply for. Now, that being said, depending on your GPA, depending on your state of residency, depending on what degree path you're in, sometimes depending on whether you are a man or a woman. There are various criteria that get put on a lot of these endowed scholarships. So as you start looking through that list, yeah, it gets a little almost mind-numbing with all of the various criteria that exist on those scholarships. We're hoping to really take a lot of that work out of it, applying, you apply for the endowed scholarship, you tell us you're interested, and we say, okay, you're from, Arizona, you've got a really good GPA. Let's see if there's anything that you qualify for. And we're going to do that legwork for you is the plan. So obviously, if you have specific questions about that, you can definitely reach out, send me an email, and we can check into that in more detail. But our hope is that once we get those budgets from the finance office, we're going to be able to direct those funds to our newly admitted and some of our existing students as soon as we get the budgets, as soon as we get those numbers, we're going to start awarding those funds. So realistically, you do that endowed scholarship application and you can kind of be hands off as far as endowed scholarships go, and we're going to work on the rest of it for you. But definitely keep an eye out for those private scholarships. We're going to do a whole webinar series on it, but just as a little primer, if you go and look at some of those search engines, you can go down to those granular levels. You can look at states. You can look at, this is, I have a dog, maybe, or I don't have a dog. Things as simple as that. You can go really, really in depth and find scholarships that are kind of catered just to you. As you do that, the pool of applicants will decrease. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's those search engines are really good. They tend to have a lot of options out there, and there's a number of search engines available. One thing I will note, as you're looking for private scholarships, as you're starting this process, if you find a private search engine for scholarships that is charging you money, walk away, because there are some of those out there that exist. You should never be paying to find free money to go to school. So there's plenty of really good free options out there. So, and feel free to reach out if you have questions. There's also resources on the website, like I said.
Well, and I just wanted to shadow what Ryan was just saying in terms of those search engines. Keep in mind, you are applying to a very specific major. And so do look for, maybe it's marine engineering specialty, or maybe it's transportation, or maybe it's even oceanography, limited licensing opportunities, transportation related topics. And so once you start aggregating your unique nature of your major, that pool even starts getting smaller. For those in the logistics, international business and logistics, there are very few logistics degrees in the country. There you go. And that's a very hot ticket item right now. So keep that in mind as you're kind of going through this. But let's answer this one last question and then say goodnight here. And again, thank you guys all for coming on.
So I did answer it directly to the students, but let me throw it out there anyway for everybody. And before I do, I just want to point out, I did drop some links into the chat. The first one is all of our endowed scholarships. The second link that's up there is actually the endowed scholarship form that Ryan keeps on talking about. So that's going to be your application form for our institutional endowed scholarships. You can do that. It's a fillable PDF. You can print that to PDF and send the file right back to Ryan and team so they can process that and get that on onto your student's profile, so that when we get to that point where we're packaging our institutional aid, you're in there for you're competing with the other students for that program. And then the third link is going to be a link back to private scholarship sources on our website. We are doing a whole session on private outside sources of aid, but I wanted to put that out there because Ryan did mention a couple of scholarship search engines. The ones that we suggest are on this list, and they're going to be Going Merry and FastWeb. You can find the links right through that link that I dropped in the chat. So you can start looking through some of those and see which ones you can apply for in the meantime. Like you said, it's great to get on that process as early and as often as possible. So keep on applying, keep on looking for more. Students who are really diligent will be applying for those all year round, so that they can apply them to this semester, next semester, and maybe the next year after that. So get started on that process now, and you'll be set for your college first year, hopefully by the time you arrive. The last question that was put out there was, FAFSA has not yet been 100% complete, so no financial offer letter will be sent. Should we still, or no financial offer sheet, but will we still get snail mail acceptance packet? Kate, actually, that's probably a question for you. Do you want to answer that one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, your process through the admissions team here is not contingent on anything that has to do with the FAFSA. So if you've applied to us as an institution, actually under the under the admissions umbrella, we don't see any of that financial aid side of things. And so we will still send you your snail mail acceptance letter with the good news, including any merit that you may have received. That will be included in that. If you see that good news, that acceptance news digitally, it will not show that merit side of thing. That does come in the mail, so keep that in mind. But then once you have received that acceptance, that good news that has come either digitally or in the mail, then that's when you can really start looping in that financial aid team, because they will have seen maybe that your FAFSA had already been submitted, and now that we've reviewed your application, those two kind of get merged in the background, and then they can produce that financial aid offer. So keep in mind that it takes a couple of days after we have reviewed your application and made that decision till when our financial aid team can kind of loop in and put all those pieces in play. So it's not an instant turnaround. So under that admissions umbrella, under that Maine Maritime Academy, you've applied to Maine Maritime Academy, all of that will still come through whether FAFSA is in or not. And then you can start working with our financial aid team once we have determined our decision. So I hope that helps answer that. And again, thank you guys all for sticking around so late into the evening, and hopefully you're going to join us the next few. And if you can't join us live, these are all being recorded, and we will make sure that you have the link so you can go back to this one or our first one if there's anything else. Oh, and the one question is my email address kate.kana or catherine.kana. It is actually both. So you can type in either. So they both will get to me. And thank you guys again. And if there's anything else, Zach or Ryan, you guys have any last pieces of advice, throw them out.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to Kate for helping us host. Thank you to Ryan for all the information that you're sharing. And I look forward to working with all the parents and students as we go through this process together. Remember, we're all here to help. That's our jobs. So thank you for the job security. Much appreciated.
Yeah, and thank you. I will just repeat that sentiment. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Kate and Zach, for letting me butt in on one of admissions webinars here with some financial aid information. And I guess parting words of wisdom, you know, if something isn't making sense to you, you're confused, you don't understand, we are here for you. So please feel free to reach out. You see that offer letter and you're like, you know what, this doesn't make any sense, or I got my FAFSA back and I don't understand what is going on. Please do not hesitate to send me an email, give me a phone call, and we can go over it. I think ultimately our goal is to get in touch with every admitted student and their family between now and, really, I would say May is the end goal. Between now and then, we're hoping to get in touch with everybody and really go over everything, answer any questions. So we'll be in touch, but please do not hesitate to reach out first if you've got questions that you want answered.
And don't get panicked if another school has offered you more in that initial offer letter. That's where you get in touch with us and say, hey, I'm looking at these two offers. And maybe there's additional things that we can talk about, or, what is it that we can talk about, that planning, what did we put on that cost of attendance that you may not be seeing otherwise. So don't hesitate. Don't look at it and say, you know what, I'm comparing these on the kitchen table and I'm a little nervous to ask these questions because another school might have offered more. That's where you reach out to us. So we're here, but we're going to say goodnight and thank you guys all.